What up, though? Back with another Woodward Pistons draft show. I am pleased to be joined by Jam Hines, who writes for Draft Digest, but that is just the tip of the spear, just one of many things on this man's extensive resume. We will have few guests who have quite the resume that Jam does here. He is a graduate of the University of Virginia. He got his bachelor's there, also got his master's from Duquesne. After that, has worked with Coach Tony Bennett at the University of Virginia in some off-season camps, has also worked as a assistant coach at Edgewood College, and currently is a scout for BPA Hoops. Again, there are going to be few guests who will have the resume and the experience as Jam Hines. So thank you so much for joining us, Jam Hines.
Steve, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be on there. And then also in the presence of such a legendary Zoom background, man, I absolutely love it.
I know I'm running out of jokes for this one, though. I mean, I love it. I'll never get rid of it. But every time I'm on like anything here, I'm like, oh, I think he's calling over to Serbia. He doesn't seem too happy. Or like, oh, he's got Ben Wallace on one line and Chauncey on the other. He says he regrets his decisions. So we'll have to keep putting these in there. Maybe this time it's like, oh, he's calling over to Charlotte to ask Michael Jordan if he wants to know how to run his organization competently. He put him on hold on two phones. So today we're going to talk about off-season events, though, and break them down. There have been quite a bit of off-season events. We're talking about Portsmouth Invitational Tournament. We're also talking about the G League Elite Camp. And then this week we are filming this May 19th at 4 p.m., 4:41 p.m. Pacific time. The NBA Draft Combine has just wrapped up. So I wanted to bring Mr. Hines here because he was at Portsmouth and he has all this extensive background on these things. So number one, we want to give y'all an idea of like what's the sense of an off-season event like this is like. Like, so what kind of events are these? Like, how do you separate Portsmouth, G League Elite, and then the NBA Draft Combine? What are they like?
Absolutely. So great questions. So the first thing, it's a lot of excitement in the air from the prospects, the support systems, all the NBA decision makers that are attending these events, and obviously a lot of nerves on the prospects end as well. These are job interviews. Let's start with the Portsmouth Invitational. The Portsmouth Invitational, so that is an all senior invite. So it's a committee that decides, so there's invitations to the top seniors. They have an opportunity to obviously accept or decline the invitation. So the seniors that you're going to see in those type of settings, and this is the Portsmouth Invitational, are ones that are those borderline second round undrafted free agents, ones that teams are looking at two ways, ones who may not necessarily be NBA players, but they could be a part of the organization in the G League, or there's also opportunity for them to be able to be seen by overseas evaluators and decision makers at Portsmouth. It's a huge contingent of overseas scouts, teams, and everyone pretty much there in one place to get eyes on these seniors. And with this event, we saw, as we do see each and every single year, we have those who will move up to the next stage, if you will, of the pre-draft process. Those who play well in Portsmouth will get an invite to the G League Elite Camp or right to the NBA Combine, like we saw Dayton's Imani Camara, who performed terrifically in the Portsmouth Invitational, and he got an invite straight to the NBA Combine.
Yeah, and there have been guys like Jimmy Butler in the past who've leveraged being really good at Portsmouth into sneaking his way to the very end of the round one. He's probably their best success story there as well. So what about the G League Elite Camp?
So Elite Camp is kind of like the next level up. Those are it can include seniors, but it's just an all invite for those who are essentially on the cuffs of being in the second round as well, but they're more so a little more firm than those seniors who are participating in the Portsmouth Invitational. And like I said, that's another time for people to go impress in front of NBA decision makers and get a chance to go and earn that combine invite, which is like that third level ultimate stage that everybody really wants to get to, no matter if you're projected first, second round, whatever your situation is.
Can you say a little bit more about like the history of the G League Elite Camp? Because to me, when I did research into it, I could find from 2019, 2021, and then 2022, like guys that they got the invite. And really, when I was looking at the history of it, it seemed like 2018 was when they went through a revamp of this. Obviously, it's like the G League hasn't been around that long either, so this is something different. But like this seems to be more of a recent thing, right? Like the most high profile alum that they will advertise on the G League Elite Camp website is Jose Alvarado. So can you speak a little bit more about how recent this thing is?
Exactly. I'm not sure the exact date, but it's fairly recent. I think it's within the late 2000 teens, like 16, 17, something like that, where it was revamped. It's essentially it helps get another event for those that. So the way I look at it is the best way I think you should look at it is so the PIT is for seniors, and it's a very similar situation, similar process for the G League Elite Camp, but it's not strictly for seniors. You're gonna have the same type of format. You're gonna be broken up into teams. You get a chance to do the NBA combine like testing where they do your measurements, the vertical jump, the shuttle runs, and all those type of things as well. So you get pretty much the same type of deal and evaluation process at both sites. But the great thing about being at for the G League Elite Camp, you essentially are going to be in Chicago for that entire weekend. If you're so lucky to be able to get called up. One thing that I saw that ESPN did show, which I thought was very, very cool, and it kind of just shows the camaraderie of the G League camp, but just basketball in general, a little behind the scenes, how they'll knock on one of the invites. So it was Hunter Tyson who was invited from the G League camp, also a Portsmouth guy who moved through the system all the way to the combine. But so they knocked on his door, told him you're going to be invited to the combine. He's excited. And they go to the next person, I think Kendrick Davis, and they moved on and moved on. And so it's just it's a really, really terrific situation for those players, and something that they certainly won't forget as they move to this pre-draft process.
Yeah, and with the G League Elite Camp too, how do they go about the invites? Because with Portsmouth, it's straightforward. It's seniors, right? People who've been in college at least 4 years. With the NBA Combine, pretty much everybody knows that, right? It's everybody that has been out there that enters their name in the NBA Draft Combine. But I think the G League Elite Camp is the one that still not everybody really knows how the invite system works.
Exactly. So I don't know all the intricacies, but from what I've been told and understand at a base level of it, is essentially it's chosen by NBA executives and scouts. They get the group together, they get the list, and they'll get that invite list. And then from there, similar process, they'll choose the top performers who will move on and go up and play to the combine. I think there were 8 players invited from the G League camp that made it to the combine, and most of them performed pretty well.
Yeah, and 8 is double what it normally is. So on my podcast, Resball Pod, I did a G League Elite Camp preview. And in the last episode, I looked at 2019, 2021, 2022, and all 3 of those years, they only invited 4 dudes. So this year, I don't know what prompted it, if they just like people thought like all 8 of these guys were deserving of it too. But when I've talked to other people too, they're like, well, it's not necessarily always like the guys that dominate, but there are people that decision makers will be like, you know what, I want to see that guy with so and so, or like, you know what, I want to see this guy amongst other athletic people. So hopefully they'll keep doing that in the future of like inviting a little bit more, because 4 is pretty small, right?
Yeah, it definitely is. I think 8. And it's not like they just chose people. Oh, you kind of play well. Listen, I think they were legitimate guys that you could run down that G League elite list from J. John Gortman, P.J. Hall, Dylan Jones, Sir Jabari Rice, and the list that goes on with those guys who were invited. They all had standout role performances that they were well deserving of their invite.
And then lastly, we have the NBA Combine. Like that's probably the easiest one to explain, right?
Yep, it's the show. Like that's where everybody wants to be at the end of the day. And now with the new change of CBA, that's where everybody kind of has to be with. Once you go to the combine, getting your measurements and participate in those type of drills as well. Like I said, it's where everybody wants to be. It's the main stage. That is the mecca of the basketball world right now, where literally everything is going on right now. Long days and nights for prospects working out, having pro days, media, executives. They're all right there, burning the midnight oil, if you will, throughout this time process there.
Yeah, and amongst that, like burning the midnight oil, what kind of prospect needs to show up to all of these things? Because I know like a general public person will see like a GG Jackson and then be like, why in the world is he not working out? How come he just showed up and then took his measurements and bounced? Like, what kind of players need to show up and do everything at these kind of events?
So that's a great question. Ultimately, it's going to be up to the player, their agent, and support system to figure out what they feel like they need to participate in, and also getting that feedback from NBA teams as well. But if it's more so like if you have a promise or if you feel really good about being in the lottery, or really whatever your spot is, which typically feel like you have a good chance of being in the first round, or maybe you want to play one game and solidify yourself in that first round. That's possibly what Pods did. He actually played two games, but some talk that he could just play that one game after he almost had a triple double to start his outing for the combine. So it's just guys who are on the cusp looking to solidify themselves, whether it's in that first round or that second round. And then obviously guys who are looking to get in the G League, possibly two-way contract. So mostly, like I said, on the cups type of guys.
Yeah, definitely. And if you want an example of this, Bobby Klintman's probably the best and prime example this year. If you're out there and you're like, who is Bobby Klintman? Don't worry. There's probably a lot of people that don't know who he is, but he's like a physical specimen, workout warrior. And even though people still don't really know his name, that's the thing is like once he pulled out, everybody's like, oh, somebody must have promised him that he's going to get drafted. Because if you're a random dude and you don't show up to these things, that's the only thing that it could mean is that somebody is already like, okay, we're going to draft you at blah, blah, blah spot. So that is also another reason why certain guys, random names like Bobby Klintman you'd have never heard about are not there. So the next thing I want to ask is just a personal question of mine. And I think more people out there kind of think about it too more than they realize is like, how do you balance what happens at an event like this versus like what you saw on tape prior to this? And for me specifically, I'm always worried about like, I don't really like this guy. I know some people do. And then you show up to this event and they dominate and they look really good. And then it's like, am I wrong? Or like, is this just one of those events where their skills are going to show out? Like, how do you balance that? What do you see at this event versus like what you saw on tape all season before this?
Absolutely, great question. So it's a balancing act. You kind of take it with a grain of salt, but keep in mind that mostly the majority of these prospects, unless they were injured, whether a situation could have been, majority of them have film from this past year, multiple years, going back to high school, things like that. So that's what you're really banking on. When you get to this type of setting, you want to see if you can kind of confirm some things that you may have saw earlier in the season, especially if you haven't been able to see someone in person all year, or if you haven't seen them in a while. I want to catch with someone who was there actually soon. This trying to get a first person perspective of what the situation was with certain prospects. One of the things, because Turk Smith, we'll talk about him later, but throughout this season and then through the combine, he is a smaller guy, but he's looked a little bit bigger. You know, some mature muscles been added to his frame, to the upper body. I'm not going to say that he's going to be, some type of bodybuilder. He's not going to be Scoot or anything like that. But you do see those type of things, where it seems like he is getting stronger, and that's a positive for him. So that's what you want to see and kind of check in on those type of things. See how people are handling a new NBA style offense with that NBA coaches there, what they look like in that type of environment. And it's also pretty tough. I feel like it's an environment where mostly skill guards with feel kind of shine, because at the end of the day, it's a scrimmage with new teammates. You're getting up and down. So those are the type of guys that typically shine.
Yeah, we'll definitely circle back to that too, because I think these type of events are biased towards certain position. I'm more inclined to think like you that it is typically skewed towards like super skilled guards and like guards that kind of have been through the ringer before. The last thing I want to say before we move on to like impressions for each of these things is for everybody out there, the biggest thing for all of these events is it's in one centralized location with just about everybody that you ever want to see for the draft there. The hardest part of any scout's job is travel. It sucks when you have to go to like Middle Tennessee State then go to Kennesaw State, then go to like Morehead State, these places that are out in the middle of nowhere. I ought to know. I grew up in New Mexico. Guess what? Ain't nobody want to come out to us. Even if you want to go see like Pascal Siakam and New Mexico State, you have to fly either privately into Las Cruces, which is a tiny airport, or you have to fly into Albuquerque, drive 6 hours down south to go see him, or you have to fly to El Paso, drive like the 2 or 3 hours north to go see him like that. So that's the biggest thing for this is like, hey, I wanted to see like Ben Shepherd is probably a really good example. I bet a lot of people really wanted to see Ben Shepherd, and they got their wish, right? They got him. He showed up and he played well. Podziemski might be another guy a little bit like that, like you mentioned him before. I don't know that like Santa Clara is not way out of the way, but I'm sure there are a lot of scouts that are just like, I ain't making that trip because it's not in a major metropolitan area. So that's always the biggest thing that I try to stress to people is like it eliminates that travel. So you really hope that the guys that you liked and saw on tape will show out at these events. So that way you can kind of, get with your crew, get with your other scouting department, get with your GM and be like, see, I've been telling y'all that this guy is 100% legitimate. So speaking of being able to see there on the ground, you were at Portsmouth. So let's start with Portsmouth. Like give us your just takeaways from what you experienced there, players you want to highlight, just the whole overall experience.
Yeah, first of all, just shout out to the staff there that put together the Portsmouth Invitation. It's always an incredible event each year, and it's a huge sense of pride for the community and a moneymaker, a big source of revenue for the community as well. So that's going to start by saying that. The one of the biggest takeaways was Imani Camara, Dayton. He really impressed. He was second at Portsmouth in scoring. I think slightly behind, I think 0.6, 0.7 points behind Texas Tech's Kevin O'Banner. He also added, I believe, 10 rebounds as well. And he just had a really fantastic outing, doing what you would hope you see a little bit of what you saw from Dayton, and as well just being more aggressive. Those type of environments lend for prospects to be more aggressive. And he certainly was that, ambidextrous finish around the rim, grabbing goes, shot the ball pretty decently, which is going to be a big swing skill for him. Got up and down in transition with and without the ball. So it was a very, very solid outing. And like that, I think that's exactly what the NBA wants and what you really want to see in basketball in general, as not just a scout, but as a fan, as a person, you want to see these great stories that we've seen. Camara Rise, that we mentioned before, he played in all three events, started from the PIT. He gets the invite to, he played the two events from, he forego the G League elite camp and made it to the NBA Combine where he played well again. And, potentially is solidifying himself in that second round, if not second round, but maybe as an undrafted free agent on that two-way contract with somebody.
Anything else or any other guys to you that like really stuck out at Portsmouth that maybe like the media or like, draft Twitter didn't highlight enough to you?
I will say this: I feel like draft Twitter's all over. I
know, really, even from like 3 years ago, right? They're like everybody everywhere.
Yeah, it's a really excellent community for the most part. You kind of have that section going on about that, but of just so many diverse ideas and covering so many prospects. I will add that Hunter Tyson, he's one who moved through all three, starting at the PIT. He he got hurt in that second game, twisted his ankle after having a very good first game. I think it was 20 plus points. Hit multiple threes in that game one. And then he comes out, get the invite to the G League Elite Camp, does well there, similar stuff there, and then also with the combine as well. But he is a 6'8" shooter, plays with the chip on his shoulder. He did those type of things, fiery at the PIT. And then really, it's a lot of guys. Demoy Hodge was there as well. He shot the cover off the ball, 14 of 28 there, 19 points per game, which was third at the event. So sensing the theme here, he was one who was also invited to move up as well. And then Southern Utah's Tevian Jones, he scored a Portsmouth Invitational high there, 36 points, dropped 7 threes. He was very impressive with his size and length as well. 6'6" with a 6'10" wingspan. he's probably going to be someone that teams will be looking at for the G League, and then also a lot of overseas look, and then just also want to give a shout out to Javon Johnson, 6'6" wing from DePaul, 7'1" wingspan, shot 43% from the field on 6 attempts at DePaul, and he has some very good moments over at the PIT as well as defender with his length and just being a confident shooter. And then the last one I want to mention is Jake Stevens. He had a pretty solid outing. It wasn't spectacular at the PIT, but he was the best stretch big in my opinion there. And then be able to see him in person, he was one person that I definitely wanted to get a chance to catch live. Saw him on film a bunch throughout the season, but to be able to see how big he truly is at 6'10" with 6'11" with a 7'9" wingspan, just a really big guy who's fluid and can shoot the ball.
I know that's the thing too. Like you never really know how big somebody is until you're there next to them and just realizing like, oh my gosh, like Christian Coloco, I'm here at the University of Arizona. He's one of those guys that I try to tell people like, he is big. Like you don't think he's big. And then you're next to him and you're just like, oh my gosh. And we have one guy like that now in Henri Vesar. Like I've been next to him a couple times and I'm just like, you are so much bigger and taller than Azulis and Balo, like it's alarming. So yeah, absolutely. Hunter Tyson, though, I just want to highlight real quick, when you say a chip on his shoulder, one of the things that Detroit Kool-Aid and I talked about when we were talking about the G League elite camp with Hunter Tyson, the rebounding, like the way he got better at rebounding over the last year. This is somebody that never really rebounded at a high level. His first 3 years at Clemson, every year was under 80 rebounds. Even as a senior, it's 137. You're like, whatever. But then as a fifth year senior, 325 rebounds. Like he almost increased his rebounds to over 200 from where it was the season before. So yeah, that's to give you an idea of like chip on his shoulder and the level of worker and the level of physicality that he's gotten. And already at that size 6'8" 3-point shooter, just seems like somebody that teams want to fit into the rotation no matter what. So yeah. Let's move on to the G League Elite Camp though. What are your takeaways from the G League Elite Camp?
Well, let's talk about Hunter Tyson real quick again. Maybe since we parlay right into him, but he was someone, like I said, he just continues to stand out with his shooting and just the competitive edge, trying to take charge. He really competes at an out of area block. He's rebounding out of the area, doing a lot of just very good things for a role player. I mean, the athleticism may be the one thing that kind of holds him back, but he's going to compete on both ends of the floor and has a true NBA skill with the shooting and that size and shooting, especially the movement shooting that he can provide the team as well. And then also in that G League elite camp, another player that really stood out to me was Landers Nolley. He actually did not get invited to the combine, which was very surprising to me. I thought he had shot the ball very, very well. Um, like that one still gets me. He's a sleeper for me. I think he's someone that teams should still consider in the second round or as a priority undrafted free agent. But at 6'7", positional size, the shooting, the shot making, the confidence. I know that there were a lot of times throughout the season where his shot selection was a little bit questionable. And I get that to an extent when you are the number one option. And that's what your role was. But he has the skill set to play off the ball. He's flashed to be able to navigate screens as a cutter and to really thrive off the ball to help the team and be able to have that role adjustment. Role versatility and adaptability are two very important things for me that I look at when projecting guys. And you were saying, or at least motioning that you're a Landers fan as well, or like what you saw too.
Yeah. I wonder because he's somebody that like Draft Deeper and a couple other like legit, informed. They don't like doing hot take kind of draft evaluators out there in draft Twitter have said like we really like and want to be a sleeper. I think that Landers Nolley's probably been promised by somebody because it's odd that he didn't get invited already, right? where somebody probably within like 31 to 45 is like, hey, we're going to take you in that range. And to me, he's one of the guys that like basketball geometry, when you look at his shot chart, he's read from both sides in the corners. He's read from the right baseline, he's read from the left baseline, he's read from right corner, he's read from left corner, and then he's read in the paint, I believe. That just seems like somebody that's going to work 6'7", 220, like you said. He can play everywhere from shooting guard, maybe even over into power forward. This seems to be somebody like maybe Kendrick Williams is like the comp, or somebody to think like that, where you're like, yeah, they're probably not going to get all that usage, but you know what? You buy into the shooting, you buy into the physicality, you buy into the versatility. I think he is somebody that probably already got a promise, because I agree with you. It's really odd that he didn't get the invite, because he played not just good, he played great.
Yeah, he certainly did, and I actually posted about it on Twitter as well. He probably has the second best shot fake in this class, behind Sir'Jabari Rice, who also
New Mexico State legend Sir'Jabari Rice. He cooked my Lobos a couple times.
Man, he is. He gets everyone. You know, like if you've seen it 100 times, and what's really impressive is in the scouting report, they've seen it, they know it's coming, but to be able to do everything from out the same slot, that's where he shoots it from. He can make plays out of it. So obviously really excel with the shot fake, the G League Elite camp, and then also at the combine as well. And being able to make plays off of that, hit a couple shots. My thing is he going to be able to shoot well enough? Does he need to be an average 3-point shooter? Does he need to be above average, because he still is a little bit slighter frame? But he will defend and he will compete. But I think he's going to be someone that guys, that front office executives will certainly be looking at in that late second round, but more so probably as an undrafted free agent.
Yeah, he really had a like last 16 games, I think it was, he scored over 16 points per game. He shot over 40% from three. And for that Texas team that didn't really have a go-to option, he stepped up when it mattered the most. I think that speaks a lot. And then just to see him perform well at every single event that he went to, it's hard to, he and Demois Hodge are the two for me that like I buy into them, but the more I saw them at these events, those were the ones that I was like, and diving back into the stats, like you can't deny them. If they get selected, it makes sense. And if they don't get selected, it's kind of a shame, because yeah, Sir'Jabari Rice for sure, like has proven to be a really good shooter, really proven that he could have been in a more featured role. At New Mexico State too, he kind of took a backseat to Teddy Buckets that one year that they beat. I forget who they beat in the first round. It was UConn, I think. So yeah, he was more of a supplementary role. And when you look at his shot chart too, he's read from everywhere. In the long parts of 3-point land, to the left wing, top of the key, right wing. He didn't really take corner threes. And to me, that's always one of the positive indicators as a shooter, is like, you're not just relying on corner shots to like bump up your percentage, you know, you're taking the long ones, and Sir'Jabari Rice definitely took the long ones for sure.
Someone else that stood out to me as well is Dylan Jones, Weber State. 6'6", I think he was right around 230 or something like that. You know, with his weight measurements there, just a very versatile, undersized, big sort of, but he's more of a wing that's going to play the four. Like I said, just very versatile. He'll rebound. He had some standout games and also moments throughout this pre-draft process. The combine probably wasn't as good as the G League Elite camp for him, but you did see his ability to get downhill, to make plays for others, to rebound, took a couple of charges. So I think he's someone personally, and I believe if you do believe in his 3-point shooting, then he is someone that could be draftable. Personally, I'll have him as a late second round type of grade. I'm looking mostly for him to be undrafted free agent, a priority undrafted free agent.
All right, so I'm going to spoil a little bit of what's coming later. Do you have him in your like guys we're going to highlight later? Because that determines whether we have that conversation on him now or later.
No, I actually do not.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because he was the one, I really fell in love with him last summer, like just grinding tape during the summer and trying to find guys that like have been overlooked. Great passer, like super underrated as a big man. He's kind of the center there at Weber State. He's kind of the power forward, kind of like the lead guard at times. He's in this weird spot on a team that doesn't have a ton of talent. So you got to factor that in. but man, he sucks on defense. And I don't say that just to say that. Like, if you're bad on defense, that's what I'm going to say. Like, he couldn't defend anybody. And that's what made me like push him down the board and ultimately push him out of the top 100 this year, even going into the offseason, because I was like, man, I think he has to go back and like really work on the defense. That's what's going to kill him and not do it. And then the 3-point percentage just kept going down and down and down as well. In conference play, I believe he shot something like 29% from three. It was very bad. Like you said, if somebody bought into the 3-point shot, it's an easier sell, even with the defense that isn't that great, because he's a fantastic passer, super underrated there. He can like run some offense and do a lot of damage in like the direct handoff game and stuff like that. But if you don't have a 3-point shot, then at 6'6" to 230, seemed like he had a pretty good wingspan, not a great athlete either. And in the NBA, if you're big, who's undersized, and you're either not a great leaper or a great shooter, it's just really, really, really hard to overcome that. He can go back for one more year, which I think he could and he should, and really work on defensive fundamentals, because he could be a good team guy for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. He's definitely one that I would like to see come back. And but it's gonna these type of situations are gonna be so tough for guys because you have to when you come back. Also get the NIL, of course. I'm not sure which one like at Weber State compared to others, but still you come back, get your NIL, or do you go be a second rounder? Do you play in the G League? Are you okay with the pay structure there and your situation there? So you're really going to have to, for guys like Dylan, you're going to have to figure out what is going to be your best development path, both in the short and long term. And I think it's someone that can come back, that should come back to school, but we'll see.
Yeah, and he's the one of the reasons why I asked that question of like, how do you factor in like what you saw the rest of the year versus what happens here? Shout out to Bryce Simon, one of your Draft Digest compatriots there. He's a really big Dylan Jones fan and was pumping him up during both the G League Elite Camp and the Combine. But that was the thing that was just like, man, this kind of event like will hide Dylan Jones's weaknesses on defense, because nobody cares about defense at these events, right? And even if they play perfect defense, if they're not standing out on offense, it's just not what this type of event is designed for. So still rooting for Dylan Jones, but yeah, definitely go back. Anybody else you want to talk about for the G League Elite Camp?
There's one person, but before I do move to this person, I will say this. People may not care about the defense, but I'll say I do at these things. And I think it's a good contingent that does as well, at least the effort wise. We know it's going to be up and down, things will get sloppy. But if you're competing, and like I said, with Dylan Jones trying to take 2 charges, that's something that I want to see from him. When you have these disadvantages defensively with your athleticism, he's going to have to use his feel, his IQ, to be in good position to make things happen defensively. So those type of things I want to see from him.
Yeah, my response to that, and again, to go back to my question, is like, wouldn't it be somebody in a team interview being like, dude, why didn't you do this during the season then? Right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I'm sure that's some of the questions going to be asked, what happened defensively with you, not just with him, but with anyone, they want to know these things. They will ask these things. And I thought it was really cool outside of some of the strange moments that ESPN decided to pan away from the action there and just have a full screen of the whole team talking, the broadcast team talking, which is very interesting. But on some of those, it was good to hear like Bobby Marks talk about the questions that he asked, prospects. One of them, he said, what makes you uncomfortable? And there was other ones that I heard that, what role do you see yourself playing? I think it was Dell Demps. What role do you see yourself playing with this team? And they're trying to see, are you going to say something wild? Like, do you see yourself? It's great to have the confidence for sure, but do you see yourself as something that's just not going to fit with this team, that's completely unrealistic, either right now or like really long term for what they have in mind with you? And then kind of figuring out, all right, this may not be the fit of this is what he kind of sees for him, and this is the plan that we have. And also, we do have different plans. Are you willing to come on board on our plan? Like, are you going to do this begrudgingly? And what type of barriers are we going to, or can we anticipate that you were going to have for you getting on our plan, whether if it is your role, your nutrition, and just following that laid out development plan that the team has for you.
Yeah, maybe we can have a on the fly section of like complaining about the ESPN broadcast of these events because I don't need to hear these guys asking dumb questions to each other. I don't need to be focused on the broadcast crew, right?
Yeah, hopefully that's something they'll fix next year. I mean, they're the worldwide leader. They have, the resources, the means to make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just maddening every single year. So, anybody else you want to highlight for the G League Elite Camp?
Real quick, PJ Hall stretched the floor out of Clemson. Very fluid shooter, effortless shooter, plays hard. A little bit of an underrated athlete. Strong frame as well. It was going to come down to how well he's going to shoot at the next level, but he's a G League guy. And then real quick, J.J. Gortman. I think that was a huge, huge, huge thing for Overtime Elite, being able to have someone participate in the G League Elite Camp. And then also go on to the combine as well. They were already incredibly viable, but it continues to add to the case they continuously sell to the prospects and their families.
Yeah, definitely. I'll get to Jay Gord here in a minute. But yeah, shout out to Clemson. I'm just glad that the other Hunter didn't show up because I always get Chase Hunter and Tyson Hunter, Hunter Tyson. See, I even get his name mixed up. That was like the mix up for me every year in Clemson. But yeah, PJ Hall, great stretch big. I'm glad he showed out there. But Jay Gort, I think like athletically, he was one of the guys that immediately stood out. And a lot of us in the people that focused on OTE kind of knew that because he's somebody who was like a lob threat, even though he's the point guard there, was also kind of a younger guy. He's 20 years old, but still he flashed some like off the dribble game with his jumper that I think was interesting as well, but just with the size and he never backed down from any challenge too. I'll give him that. Like Amen ran through him like a laser beam, but he was one of the few people that could still there. And he's like 6'2", 180. Amen's like 6'7", 209. Like that's going to happen. But you just saw Jay Gore like get switched on to big guys, and then at this G League Elite Camp, again proved that I'm right up there with Tamani Camara in terms of being the best athlete here. That like it's hard for guys to keep up with me. But to me, again, the jumper is really intriguing to me. He shot 80% from the line in their 16-game season, and then he shot 32% from three, which to me isn't bad. I think there's a lot to like there. The name that I keep thinking about is Jalen LeCue. I don't know if you remember Jalen LeCue, but this is like Jalen LeCue with an actual jump shot. That to me screams like, I want to invest this guy, get him on my G League team for a while, and then in a season or two, like could potentially be a starter or at the very least be like a six-man candidate.
Absolutely. I definitely remember Jalen. I really just loved his blend of just explosive athleticism and shot making. Still had to become, he was able, good shot maker, but still had to be able to develop the jumper that necessarily really didn't come around. But for Gorman, it'll be great if he continues to develop, with that frame. I was trying to see if I can find his wingspan because his length always pops out to me. So I think that it's certainly a positive on that he uses well defensively and also finishing at the rim too.
I want to say it was 6'10". I think he measured in at like 6'1" and a half and like 6'10". So that was one of the things because when I was texting that to some of my friends, they're like, he's Rajon Rondo. I was like, he might be, yeah, because Rondo had those, super long arms like that, even though he was only like 6 feet 6'1". He buys in on defense too. That was the one thing I forgot to talk about with Jay Gort is he would pick up guys full court pretty much in every single game. Like he wasn't always tuned in 100% all the time, but the fact that he had the cardio and the ability to do that, and again, that's another thing to me that separates him from the pack that you just don't see guys go out of their way to do that at just about any level. So Jay Gort, fascinating name, and I wonder if he gets drafted. For my Pistons, if they had like a mid-round, second rounder, I'd say for sure. At 31, it's not bonkers, I don't think. After out of the top 20 in this draft, I think the field is wide open. And for somebody with that athleticism, with the commitment to defense and the burgeoning jump shot, it's not a bonkers idea, I think, or somebody to invest in with like even a high second round pick. Go ahead.
No, I'm saying absolutely. I agree with you. That's what the NBA and the draft is all about. Like you have to be able to have these development plans in place. If that's your guy at 31, the case is, and you like how he projects and the plan that's in place, you go ahead and pull the trigger.
So let's move on to the big stage, the show, the NBA Draft Combine. What are the takeaways now that we've had the scrimmages, we've had the athletic testing, we've had the measurements, we've had guys show up just to piece out? What's going on?
Well, we'll start with day one. Pods for sure. I mean,
So for the general audience, it's Brendan Podziemski,
there we
guard
go.
out of Santa Clara. A lot of us in the draft community affectionately just call him Pods for short.
Absolutely. And, you flirted with the triple double, the 10.7 rebounds, 8 assists, also 2 steals, hit a couple threes. The second game was a little bit underwhelming, not quite to that, but that's not something I'm worried about at all, considering, the nature of the scrimmage and combine environments. That's not a big deal at all. Plenty of tape that he put on at Santa Clara as well, that I'm sure that executives will go back and, dive a little deeper in now after his first performance. But with him, he just has such a unique nose for the ball, whether it's rebounding, defensively, he's almost like a magnet for us. So when you talk about Hunter Tyson rebounding, I still value rebounding, like rebounding you in possessions and you create extra possessions of rebounding. That's still incredibly valuable to me, especially with the guard. His ability to grab and go. He did that. He pushed. He played passing lanes. He was on the ball. And it was good to see him. I think we have a 39-inch vertical, if I'm not. I forgot what his vertical was, but I know he tested vertically better than what was expected. I think functionally he's a very good athlete, despite not being as long as people. The one thing with the 6'5" wingspan is about 6'3" without shoes, 6'4" with shoes. But his ability to play on and off the ball as a shot maker, as a skilled passer, you can play a lot of pick and roll in the NBA, and he can do that for you as a scorer and as a playmaker as well, a very skilled playmaker. So I was very, very excited to see him play well. And then also, it seems like he's going to rise up boards. We'll see. He could be following on the lead of Jay Will last year, another Santa Clara player.
No, J Will.
Yeah, J Dub. There you go. So I think that's certainly a positive in his direction to see someone else from Santa Clara just do this, who's very skilled and can shoot the ball as well.
Yeah, Podziemski is another one that I was like, I don't know. But then you just can't deny the production and the athletic testing, all that stuff. If you're into measurables, like, cool, I guess. I'm personally not somebody that's going to harp on those things, but like you said, 6'3" and 3/4 without shoes, 6'5.5" wingspan. It probably just limits him to guard is what it is. This is somebody that you could easily see in like a Jordan Poole type role, only he's more physical than Jordan Poole, but I think he has those same attributes of like, I'm not afraid to take any shot. I'm going to put him up. And Podziemski was in a heavier load than Poole had. I'm also a University of Michigan alum. I was there during the those runs. Poole was my most frustrating player. So Podziemski has more like IQ and heavier load, better true shooting, all those things, and the rebounding and the defense. It's just easy to buy into him, and probably sneaked into end of round one now. Like, do you think maybe that's going to happen with Podziemski?
I have him as I give him a top 20, 25 is great. That's kind of where the range I've had him all year for the most part. But I think with his performance, I expect him to continuously shoot well in his invite his team workouts and continue just to be able to show his skill level. And I think he can sneak up in that late first round. If he slides to that second round, mid-second or so, I think that's a real steal in the second round.
Yeah, it'd be bananas if he went like after 35. I think 35 is like the latest, just because dominated here at the combine. if you put on the film, there's very little that you're going to nitpick and be angry with. Put that team on his back. Again, efficient, everything you want, can pass, can rebound. There's not much to really nitpick with Podziemski.
And
So,
crazy touch. Just
yeah,
crazy touch. I absolutely love it. I think him and Julian Strother have some of the best touch in this class, especially on floaters and flip shots and, from these different angles. And as someone who is for Pods, who relies more on craft and deception and skill as opposed to, explosion or just this tricky handle to create separation and beat defenders, So I really like the compensators that he does have for his lack of that quick first step or the explosion that you want.
Yeah, and even for a skeptic like me, if you dive back into like the shot chart, he's 45.7% from that left wing. He's 42.6% from the top of the key. He's 51.9% on 52 shots from the right wing. Then he's 50% from the right corner. And then at the rim, he was 64.6% on 113 shots. Again, if you're saying like this guy's going to be in the first round, look at those stats, look at the shot charts. He barely missed from three. He's good at getting to the rim, above average finisher. And it's not like Santa Clara had a bunch of guys to take pressure off him. So yeah, Podziemski, can't say enough good about him. So anybody else you want to highlight from the NBA Combine?
Certainly Ben Shepherd. He's one of my guys at the end, so I don't, maybe one of your guys too. I don't know if you want to skip over him for now and do a deeper dive at the end, but he's certainly one on my list.
Yeah, we'll get back to him in a minute because I figured his name was going to come up here at the end.
Let me see who's now. Okay, let's go. Imani Bates. So I will say this about him. I really enjoyed and was pleasantly surprised for him to be more willing to move the ball, to do more of those role player type of things and blend in, the pull up shooting, this general shot making that he sprinkled in, had a nice step back, the usual Bates, tough shot making that he has. But it was good to see him do that, then also compete defensively. Like he was trying to block shots on the ball. He was giving good energy. And I really, really like that from him. And obviously without knowing him, not understanding what his mindset is, the big thing that I have for him, and then also I'm sure a lot of NBA executives, is can you change that mindset and adjust to being a role player or supporting player off the bench? And I think this in the combine setting, when it's easy to go out, this is what I do. I get buckets, and it's a bucket getting type of setting for him to go and do that. And he didn't necessarily do that. So I think that's a positive sign. And he's someone is still a very good shooter at was he 6'9", as a big wing. If he can be able to consistently compete defensively, and be willing to do that, and then also spot up, hit those shots, and blend in when it is his time to kind of go ahead on that second side, or if you got a good matchup and kind of earn your stripes, if you will. But that's one of the cool things and also tricky things about scouting too, right? Because he's gonna have to change his game, but can he do that? Does he have the tools to do that? And the willingness to do that. He has the shooting. Of course, he can do that, spotting up off the ball, but are you going to cut? Are you going to do these other things? He has some passing flashes off the bounce too. But I think he's someone the team still will really consider in that mid-second round. And I think there's a lot of questions they're going to try to ask him as well.
All right, so you inadvertently walked through the trap door here.
Woodward
Pistons. I mean, we're in Michigan, so yeah, the interest in Imani is high. There's a tweet that our Woodward Pistons account sent out asking if the Pistons should select Imani at 31. There has been a 50-50 response, and it's not just been like a gray area. It's been, yeah, versus like get him away from the Pistons. So can you speak a little bit on like if he, number one, would be somebody you would consider at 31, and then like the case for Imani Bates at 31. Chris LeBron and I talked about it on the previous edition of this, and we mainly talked about like changing the mindset, like you just said, and also like sphere of influence, because He and I kind of went back and forth. If you listen to Rafael Barlow in the NBA Big Board, he's talked a lot about Gigi Jackson recently. And one of the things he really liked about Gigi was he knows his circle is small. It's his trainer, it's his manager, it's his dad. That's it. That's his quote unquote entourage. Whereas Imani is a little bit different than that. Seems to be that's what's gotten him into trouble before. So again, like, would we consider Imani at 31? And if so, what would the case be?
I would say no. That's just a little too high to spend those resources there for uncertainty. And not even talking about, off the court, just strictly on the court, with the fit, can he adjust the off ball, like we said, the change in mentality. I would look to take more of a swing late in it. Let's say if the Pistons I can't imagine want to trade up to get him, but let's just say if they end up trading up, he could into the second round, late second round for another pick, buying a pick, whatever the case is. He could be someone who's on the list, but I think more than likely he will be someone that is considered that mid to late second and probably will be undrafted free agent. It's the shot making at that size, it's hard not to really fall in love with that, and then considering his resume. But at the end of the day, you cannot live on the tough shot making with his skill set. He's not the most explosive or quick twitch, or strong, but he is an excellent shooter, a tough shot maker that going to have to adjust and buy into a role. And, that's going to have to come on him. No one from his camp has to be on him to say, this is what's going to be my path. Even if you have something higher planned for yourself, which I absolutely get, and I know he does, and I'm sure that he does. But it's like, all right, this is kind of where I'm at right now. Let me get in the lead, find my role. I've done this, and then I'm progressive from there. So maybe it's year 1, 2, and 3. I'm working off the bench. I'm playing off the ball. Or maybe year 2 to 3, I'm playing more with the ball. 3 to 4, now I'm a secondary ball handler. A key piece for and then a rotation for someone. So I think it's going to have to be incremental steps with him. And like we talked about before, and you mentioned that you and Chris LeBron talked about, just a plan of action that's agreed upon by everyone, and everyone trusting in that plan and a change in mentality.
Did he maintain his eligibility, or is he like 100% committed? Because that's the one thing I could not remember.
That's a good question. I want to say that he's maintained his eligibility, but I'm not 100% sure. I don't remember seeing a graphic like, hey, I'm gone and I'm foregoing my rest of my eligibility. But honestly, for not just him, but for anyone, I don't see the point of saying I'm going to forego. Like, what's the point, unless you're like, top 10 for whatever the case is. But if you're late first, second, like, why close out options,
Yeah, that's my point with him too, with Imani. And Max Lewis is another guy that I argued this for, is like, I don't see the benefit in like trying to fight for, in Max's case, like middle of the round, end of the round one. In Imani's case, to be even a late second rounder, when you can work on your game, come back next year, and there's no reason to think that both of you can't be a first round pick, because the field next year is wide open. And Imani just has to work on being more efficient. I think that's the main thing. Like, once he got into conference play in the last 18 games, Imani shot 28.6% from 3 on 7.4 attempts per game. That is brutal. And for evaluators that are like, oh, I want to see how you shot against the best competition, the MAC is not exactly the best competition, and to have those shooting numbers is rough. If he just shot something like 35%, right? Even in those games, it probably ups the overall percentage to something like 37, because the overall percentage was 33% from 3 on the year. If he just shot it a little bit better in conference play, it would look a lot better, and you could buy into him being more of like this shooter. Again, he's one that I think testing is the best medicine for him, because then he gets honest input from NBA talent evaluators that are like, even the ones, if they like him, would say like, we like you, but you need to do X, Y, and Z. And then again, next year, there's no reason not to think he can't be a first round pick, because even the people that are mocked in the top 10 right now, a lot of talent evaluators are like, and so after that, you never know. And Lewis too, I mean, this isn't like a Max Lewis thing, so I'll just say this real quick. There's no reason to think he can't go back and be a top 10 pick with an improved season next year. So yeah, I'm glad you talked about Imani though, because we've needed guests like you who have more nuance, who can see both sides of things, because especially for our audience here, he's such a polarizing prospect. You know, at home, they either love you or they hate you, right?
Absolutely. I mean, like he's going to continuously be one of the most polarizing prospects in this class, and I think him and alongside someone you mentioned already, him and Gigi, those are probably the two most polarizing prospects in the class.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you want to highlight anybody else at the NBA Combine, or do you want to move on to your 6 guys that you like just after all these offseason events that you're like, you know what, these are the top 6 guys for me out of all these offseason events?
I want to highlight one more guy because the rest that I do want to talk about, they are in that six. So I want to give
Cool.
too much away. But I will say Judah Mintz, he's another one, keeping options open, and has a tough decision maker whether he's going to stay or come back. At the combine, I thought it was a pretty good representation of his game, especially the first game. 9.7 assists and 2 turnovers. He's a much improved playmaker, and he's been able to develop this whole time having the ball in his hands at Syracuse. So it was great to see him making reads off the bounce, pick and roll, cross court skips, engage defensively, and just really being him. Like he got downhill, pressured the rim, got to the patented pull-up jumper that he has with this crazy body control and his ability to contort to square up to the rim. So I really like what he did. For me, he is a second round talent right now in this class. So I think he's going to have to figure out, similar to what we talk about a lot of these prospects, do you come out in that second round if you get a promise there? Do you go ahead and get on a NBA in the NBA organization into an NBA development plan? Is going to play a lot of G League if that's the case? Are you going to play, be ready to play in the G League? Are you okay with that with your development? Or do you want to come back to Syracuse? Will the team will be okay, not an ACC leader, but he will compete to be the ACC Player of the Year. And like you talked about with Imani, if he came back, or Maxwell Lewis, and what's projected to be a weaker class, we'll see. Because honestly, it seems like every year we say that, then once you get it, because things change, they change so quickly too, and there's more film. Development isn't linear, so there's so many things that can happen. But I get, like we said, we'll say a projected weaker class next year, he can come back and solidify himself, not just as a first rounder, but as a potential lottery pick.
Are you a Judah Mintz fan?
I would say yes, and candidness and all candidness and transparency as well. I root for him as a person, because I root for all these guys as a person, but especially guys from my area, because I've seen Judah play since middle school. So as I kind of see him develop from afar, and going to those games, seeing him play in different leagues, his time at Oak Hill and everything. So I am a fan, but it just had the shooting, the 3-point shooting particularly has to come around. That is the swing skills, like either that or you have to just be an elite pull-up shooter, especially after the out of the pick and rolls, which you'll do a lot of operation with, of course. But it's going to have to be a reliable threat from three. I think, what was it? Let's see, 30%, 31%, something like that.
Yeah, it's like 30.1%. Yeah, 30.3%, excuse me.
Okay. So, and I think it might be less than 3 attempts per game, somewhere around there.
2.1.
So in volume and also percentage as well, which he can get both in the D, almost the D League, but the G League, and also at Syracuse. It's just about what's best for your development, what's best for your family.
Yeah, I agree with you. Then Judah Mintz going back and like improving as well. If this were 20 years ago, Judah Mintz is easily like a lottery pick, right? Because he's a tough shot maker. He can pass and just, dish out assists with the best of them. But he played 32 games, and there were only 10 games where he took more than 2 3-point attempts in that game. That's a problem in the year 2023. If you're a guard that's under 6'5", that is not a good finisher, which he is not as well. There's just too much blue in Judah Mintz's shot chart too. That's the thing. Like you said, tough shot maker. That's a wide rainbow or range of guys in there that can be inefficient, that can be efficient. But with Judah Mintz, yeah, the lack of the 3-point shot, being undersized, it's just a tough sell in the year 2023, even though he does have these great mid-range game, pretty good floater, and like you said, great passer. That's the one thing you cannot undersell him on. It's just his ability to pass that rock even at such a young age.
And he absolutely competes. Like I said, seeing him play up close since the middle school, and also getting down to see him play live this year, a UVA Syracuse game, and he was very, very engaged. He can be a disruptor defensively as well. So for him, either was improving the G League or coming back, being able to improve as a 3-point shooter, and then continue his playmaking growth. Because I don't see him as a playing that point guard role, someone that can share that role with someone else, more of a secondary handler, and kind of share those duties.
Yeah, and last thing for me on Judah Mintz, he has the Syracuse stink on him. Nobody wants to admit it, but like, who's the last big name out of Syracuse that anybody buys into, right? There's something about it that NBA teams just don't buy into anymore. Jeremy Grant or Michael Carter Williams are the last two I can think of that like came out of Syracuse that played a long time in the league. Michael Carter Williams, probably the last high profile like lottery pick coming out of Syracuse. There's a lot of different reasons for it, but mainly it's the zone defense that they run. I've heard so many evaluators say that guys that come out of that system basically have to relearn how to play defense. So that probably also factors into it. I don't know if Judah Mintz like put himself in the transfer portal, but that probably would have been like a really smart move if he could have done that. If he didn't do that, just because again, for whatever reason, NBA talent evaluators don't like Syracuse players anymore. So now we go on to your final grades, your top 6 guys from all of these events, from Portsmouth, which you were at, from the G League Elite Camp, from the NBA Combine. Who are 6 guys that now you're like, you know what, they were the top performers, and like, do you have them on your big board? What a draftable range, all that stuff.
I'm going to start with Ben Shepherd. I mean, I think he just had a terrific combine showing what he can do. At a smaller school, may not have got as many looks as he's been on the radar past couple of years, but maybe has not got as much of a deeper dive by a lot of the mainstream evaluators quite yet. But I think that he, just like Poz, like he warrants another deep dive for evaluation. I've not seen too much of him. I mean, he measured in I guess with shoes is 6'6". Just before I can go on, I have a small little tangent about with and without shoes, and I'll say this:
Please, yes, I'm with you here.
I totally get with and without shoes that measurements, and I understand you want to kind of get the real one, but no one's playing out there in their socks. It's shoes, so the measurements that I truly care about are the shoes. But I get the case for the without shoes, but with shoes, he's 6'6", and he's a really versatile shooter. He showed a little bit of that, being able to shoot off the bounce, catch and shoots. He was active defensively with his length and quick hands. Made some plays with the ball in his hands too. There was one particular play that stood out. He got an on-ball steal and then had a nice 2-hand bounce pass through the lane to Johnny Broome for an and one, and just kind of show a little bit of his playmaking, some of the value that he can bring. And then kind of his shooting numbers were pretty impressive when I was looking at it. So out of pick and rolls, he's shooting 45% on threes. That's on 24 attempts. He's shooting 40% on catch and shoot threes on 151 attempts, and 49% on unguarded catch and shoot threes. So he's showing it with a lot of versatility, being able to do it with the ball in his hands and without it too. And then when I put it in kind of context of the Pistons as well, they have guys who can put pressure on the rim, who can attack when you have Cade and you have Ivy, and I'm sure there's probably a lot of dissension among Killian Hayes, I'm sure. but his ability to be able, I still
You have no idea.
I still believe in Killian, and I thought he showed some signs, but it's someone that can make plays for others out of pick and roll. Shepherd can play off of all those guys, get up and down, spot up, shoot, and make plays for each other. So I think that not only was he a terrific fit for the Pistons, but really for anybody in the league.
Yeah, Ben Shepherd had an offensive explosion at the NBA Combine. So yeah, I agree with everything you said there. Not in my top six, but we'll get to that after you reveal your six. So who's number two?
Seth Lundy. We're going to continue with the wing shooters. He terrific shooter in general. Shot 30%, 40% on 6.4 attempts at Penn State. He measured with a 6'11 wingspan, that's 6'6", that's you like to see. Very tough defender, competitive defender, does not back down. And then get into some of the shooting numbers, 41% on catch and shoot threes, 45% on unguarded catch and shoot threes. So, and the reason I like to look at a lot of those catch and shoot numbers, obviously those are spot ups, working off of everybody, playing off the ball. Then the unguarded ones. This is a make or miss league. You look in the playoffs, you see how many open shots people are missing. So to see guys with a good percentage hitting unguarded shots when they're going to get a lot of those unguarded shots as a supporting player, I definitely like to see that from him.
So there's one that overlaps with my list. I feel like we're going to have a lot of overlap on our top list. He's somebody that I've argued the Pistons should select at number 31 because of everything you just said. The defense I was kind of uncertain on, even though I follow my Wolverines in the Big Ten. It's always hard to tell because the Big Ten is a lot slower league. They don't always play the type of NBA offense that you will see. But I'm glad that he showed out here and, like you said, competed. That's really all you can ask for at these type of events, and didn't look out of place amongst like superior athletes as well, which is a good sign. As a shooter, is read from everywhere. He's read from both corners, he's read from both wings, and at the top of the key, he's 34.6%. That's what you need with Caden Ivey. Like, don't overthink it.
Exactly. They say keep it simple, stupid. Like that's exactly what you need. This one may be a little bit out of the box, but as a fit for the Pistons, and then his one and done combine performance, if you will, Tristan Vukcevic.
Yeah, I had him too, so there's another overlap. Yeah.
Oh man, I guess great minds think alike, right? But just 7-footer, 7'2" wingspan. He is that stretch big. He shined in the combine his one game. His agents, his sports system said you don't supposed to do in that one game. Knocking down, I think it was 3 for 3 from deep, 21 points, 8 of 10 from the field, hit pull-ups, pick and pops, and really just showed his fluidity, be able to attack off the bounce a little bit with the ball in his hands. So I think he really showed some good glimpses of the modern game. There's still concerns about what he does defensively and with athleticism, but I'm thinking here as a stretch big and also give something that the Pistons don't have with one of their big men. Just another look for them and to keep the floor space for attackers like Cade and Ivy.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, great minds think alike. I had one of your other compatriots, Ignacio Risotto, who's the international scout extraordinaire there for Draft Digest, and he and I talked a lot about Vukcevic being a stretch big. Played for Partizan this year in the Adriatic League. He played in 22 games in their league. Shooting splits for Mr. Vukcevic were 70, that's 70.1% from 2, 40% from 3, and then 81.1% from the free throw line. Is super efficient, is a pick and pop big, is probably what you would mark him at. I'm surprised that he measured with the wingspan. I'm glad to see that. So you can slot him more over in the center. You're right. The defense is the big question. He's not really a rim protector. Not somebody that's going to get out and defend in space. But for a team like the Pistons, who don't really have a reliable stretch big, you can play Vukcevic with everybody. You can play him with Duren. You can play him with Beef Stew. You can play him with Bagley if Bagley's still here. You can play him with Wiseman if Wiseman's still here. I mean, you can play him with everybody because he has the skills that they do not, and being a knockdown three-point shooter and somebody that has been in a professional development system for most of his life. He also was developed by the Real Madrid system. There in Barcelona are the two to me that I always, the minute there's a guy from there, they get an instant bump in my evaluation because these are the top two teams outside of the United States. They do not just develop anybody. Real Madrid has developed, Luka Doncic. They've developed quite a bit of top level talent. So I definitely buy into Vukcevic.
Yeah, I thought you brought up an excellent point there, just about him being in a professional environment already, and that's what he is used to. So although you're going to obviously make the adjustment to be in the NBA, but knowing how to conduct yourself as a professional and having these training regimens and just being used to those type of things, I think that that'll be key for him. So off the court, so I do like that a lot.
All right, so number 4.
Number 4, we're going to go with Turk Smith. I mean, this is a microwave bench scorer, shot creator. Just can get it going in a hurry. He really bounced back from his first game and just had a really strong second game showing off his shot making, pull up threes, step backs, creations. Um, he was just Turk. Like, you know exactly what you're going to get from him, what his role, to clear NBA role as a bucket getter, a floor spacer, and he's improved as a passer. He really has. I'm not going to sit here and say that you want him running as your backup point guard or anything like that, but he can certainly share those ball handling duties with your primaries, and he's a capable passer out of pick and rolls. He had a nice flash of it in one of these. I think he had an offhand pass a pick and roll in the lane, just thread the needle. And that came on the heels after he had missed a wide open roller maybe about 4 or 5 possessions before that. So you kind of see both sides of the coin with him, but you see that development continues to be made on the shot maker. But with the Pistons and most teams, it's going to be like, hey, man, we need you to come in here, probably play a little bit of G League, but come in here, be a bucket getter, create your own space to floor, be aggressive.
Yeah, and to talk about his improvement in playmaking as a freshman, he dished out 67 assists. This year's a sophomore, 140. So he more than doubled his assist total. So that shows the level of film work. Passing is one of those things that only film work, like to me, is the main thing. Because yeah, you can get out there in the gym, but unless you're paying attention where your teammates are, you're breaking it down with your coaches of understanding where to pass, how to pass, when to pass, like that starts in the film room. So anybody that's going to discount Turk's IQ, get out of here with that. That's not something. I understand the shot selection and whatever, but that's his role. He's meant to do that for this NC State team that doesn't exactly have the highest level output guys. He's not in my top 6, but I definitely understand the case. For the Pistons in particular, both him and Shepard are too much of a defensive concern. And to me, I'm leaning like heavily into defense for the Pistons, as I've stated before here. Like, I don't even care about the offense for a lot of these guys where it's at now, just because the defense is so in the toilet right now. But if they've drafted him, like, I would understand at 31 for sure, because there are a few guys that have the confidence, can be like a Jordan Clarkson type, microwave scorer always off the bench that does have passing chops for sure.
And you brought up defense, so maybe we'll have some overlap in these last 2 picks here. With this, I'm gonna want to talk about Duren Holmes. He didn't have this standout combine performance, anything like that. Like, I could certainly see him coming back to school, especially I have him, as that second rounder. But I can certainly see at the top of the second round at 31, seeing the Pistons going there with the only real rim protector being Jalen Duren. You want someone else there with some foul trouble or just another look, someone else that can be a lob threat. I know I understand the duplication there, but with Wiseman, in my opinion, is not a true rim protector. Neither is Beef Stew. So you have somebody else there that can do that, be a lob threat, terrific floor runner, can switch, defend in space. And there was a little bit of upside with the shooting. I'm not completely buying it right now. I wouldn't bank on that. Maybe some corner threes, but that's not something I would buy on his. It's just a rim runner, finisher, rim protector.
Yeah, good athlete. compares favorably athletically, at least to Andre Drummond, but has more tools, I think, like in the basketball IQ than Drummond did. Yeah, I think that's a perfect case. There's going to be somebody in my top six who I'm going to argue for at the center position. Not necessarily Duren Holmes, but the same thing. And I've been arguing exactly what you have of like Duren's the only rim protector, and he's still learning to do those things. He still, it takes a while. Like if you look at somebody like Dwight Howard and their, advanced stats on defense in terms of like effective field goal percentage or like points per 100 possession in his first 4 years, they're all bad. It's not until his like fourth or fifth year where he becomes the Dwight Howard that we remember. So Duren, it's going to take time, and they can't just have one like guy that projects to protect the rim on the roster. They need to have at the very minimum at least two, because you need that presence there at all times. I think Duren Holmes athletically and defensively would be fine addition there, even at 31. So who's the final of the top six?
This one was a tough decision. I'm trying to decide between two guys. Both had great combine performances. One, Amari Bailey, and the other one is Olivier Maxence Prosper. But just for the sake of picking, I'm going to go with Mr. Maxence Prosper, a long, athletic guy at I think he measured, I think it was a 6'7" without shoes, right around in that range.
Yeah, something like that.
I thought it would actually be a measure a little taller than that. I was hoping it was a more firm 6'8", but athletic, long, competes, switchable defensively. The biggest thing, the swing skill is the three-point shooting. He is a 33% shooter on 3.2 attempts. I think he was 115 total three-point attempts. He's increased his volume each year and also percentage, which is certainly a positive thing. He was confident taking the shot during the combine. I think he only hit one of his threes, one or two threes, but nothing that's going to move the needle with that. And then kind of talking on Twitter with Nathan, a draft deeper. I know he's a big fan of Mr. Prosper, and I was just saying that my concerns with the three-point shooting, I know his concern isn't too much with that, with it being a little bit more projectable, and then all the other things that he does defensively and as a finisher. But if he's going to shoot 33%, I feel like he just has to do just a little bit more other things. Because at that point, he's more of a respectable shooter, or as opposed to a true shooting threat. So it could cause some spacing issues, but with the athlete that he is, to be able to defend on the perimeter, some bigs, I think it gives a very versatile defender there. If that's not someone they end up going with that fifth pick.
What position is he? That's the thing that I struggle with the most.
Yeah. I mean that's a great question. I think he's more of a four. That's kind of where I have him at. And you can match him up. He's going to be able to defend some wings, some bigs, but I don't see him defending, at least starting defending many twos. But as far as being able to switch and be confident and competitive in space, because a lot of times when people, I wish we would flush more of these conversations out, because a lot of times when people are talking about you can defend 1 through 4, most times you're talking about you can switch and be competitive 1 through 4. It's not like, all right, you can defend the 1, you can defend the 2, you can defend the 3, you can defend. That's not most times what people are talking about. It's just more about being competitive, and that's what I think that's what he can do while defending 3s and 4s and some small ball 5s.
Yeah, the shooting seems to be like okay, like you said, 33.9% on 115. That's not bad. I mean, Marquette's not exactly like a 3-point draining monster. 6'6" 3/4" Olivier Maxence Prosper, 212 pounds, 7'1" wingspan. If anybody in this draft class is going to get the PJ Tucker label slapped on him, because all these undersized power forwards, everybody wants to label them PJ Tucker. I'm guilty of it as well. I think this is the guy though, because of that wingspan, 7'1" at 6'6" 3/4", so 6'7", 6'8" with shoes on. He's bigger than PJ Tucker, and he has that long wingspan too. And PJ Tucker is probably about a 33% 3-point shooter, and you're mainly asking him to just like sit in the corner, PJ, take those open threes, hit enough of them, and then just continue to play tough defense. Like that seems to be exactly like the guy that I was saying. Like I don't care much about their offense. Prosper seems to do enough and have the size and the defensive chops to fill a role at the forward spots. Do you think he could play small forward though? So like say, they bring him off the bench first, and so he's like in between a Cade Cunningham at shooting guard and like an Isaiah Stewart at the power forward. Could Prosper be there at the 3?
I think you can experiment with some lineups like that. That wouldn't be my personal choice. I don't. The lack of shooting the ideal ball skills for me. That's kind of where my hangup is. But at the same time,
Me too.
you have Cleveland. I know it's a little bit different, but they had Dean Wade playing a lot of the 3, and they're back there with Mobley and Allen as well too. So I don't think it's ideal, but you could make it work.
Yeah, the other names I keep thinking about with Olivier Maxence Prosper are Dorian Finney-Smith, Taurean Prince, and Royce O'Neal. Like he seems to be that kind of player. And Dorian Finney-Smith probably the one that's closer to that, because his 3-point percentage again has been around there. Some years it's been like in the low 30s, some years it's been in the high 30s, other years it's been like 33. But the defense is really what makes Dorian Finney-Smith like a consistent NBA player that every team wants. So it just seems to me like, even though I'm not quite sold on Prosper, he has all these things like the PJ Tucker wingspan. He has these things like the defensive chops and enough of a 3-point shot like Dorian Finney-Smith. So yeah, I wouldn't be mad if the Pistons end up doing it there. I would personally go in other directions, like you said, because I think the small forward position is not his ideal position, and that's what the Pistons need. Number one is wing defense. So speaking of wing defense, the guy that I wanted to start with, I'll just give you some of the guys that overlaid with you in your top 6. Vukcevic, obviously Tristan Vukcevic, because of the pick and pop abilities he has, and then Seth Lundy, again, like he's just hot from everywhere in 3. That's exactly what the Pistons need. So the other 4 I want to start with is Imani Camara out of Dayton. 6'7" is what he measured at. 220 pounds is, I believe, what he measured at, and 7 feet wingspan, 7.5-inch wingspan. So he has that, big wingspan. Also is athletic enough to play the small forward. The 3-point shot is really the thing, though, with Imani Camara. He wasn't a 3-point shooter really his first 2 seasons at Georgia, and then transferred over to Dayton. And in the last 2 seasons has upped his volume more. And over the last 2 seasons, he has been able to take more threes. He took a total of 145 threes the last 2 years, shot 35.2% across these 2 years. And the last season took the most threes he ever has in his college career at 80, and then shot 36.3% from 3. Athletically is really where I buy into Imani Camara. And again, he showed that he was a top-level athlete at the Portsmouth Invitational Tournament. He showed he was a top-level athlete at the Combine. Like, that's just number one thing to me is, okay, it would be one thing if he dominated at Portsmouth and showed up to the Combine, and it's like, oh, okay, he's not really that level athlete. He just kind of showed everybody. But it was like, no, he's still there. He can play both forward spots as well, Imani Camara. He was more of like a small ball 4 there at Dayton. But I think moving over to small forward will help him out a lot more, and use that wingspan, maximize that wingspan even more to cover the biggest forwards like a Kawhi or like a LeBron. And he is a defensive monster. Like, that is the thing that everybody had sold on him the last 2 years, is that he will get after it on defense no matter what. Again, the 3-point shot is going to have to come along. Maybe this is somebody that spends time a little bit more in the G League. His shot chart is tough when you look at it, because he's blue from a lot of different places. Didn't really take corner threes. The one silver lining to me for Imani Camara, and definitely at small forward, is at the top of the key, he took the most 3-point attempts out of the whole area from 3-point range, took 35 threes from the top of the key, and shot 48.6% from three in that area. And that's the longest part. A lot of people say that's the most difficult part of the court. That's a super positive indicator. And by the way, Imani Camara shot 71.3% at the rim, which is out 160 shots. So it's not like it's a small volume, right? This guy is a finisher. And my final sell for him in the Pistons too is Cade's favorite pass is the lob pass. Get Cade as many lob threats as you possibly can. Imani Camara is one of the best in this draft class, in my opinion, at catching lobs.
And he just adds to that versatility that you want to always have with any team. And I can see him the grab and goes, getting out and pushing the break with Ivy on the
yeah, that would be so awesome. Yeah,
I really do like that fit as well, and be able to be a versatile defender as well. Like you already mentioned, it's going to come down to if he can consistently show that he's going to improve as a shooter, or at least continue to be a reliable enough shooter to where everything else continuously plays for him, whether that's the passing, the slashing, getting out on the break, and being able to be a versatile defender for the team as well.
And then the other center that I briefly mentioned before is Nathan Mensah from San Diego State University. Somebody that I still see in my nightmares since he's tormented my Lobos his entire college career. I mean, you talk about shot blocking. There are few in this draft class who can block shots like a Nathan Mensah. 5-year career at San Diego State, block percentage average from all 4 years is 9.5%. 2 seasons where he was over 10%, those are really good. That just means he's keeping people away from the rim. He finally got his due on this national title run where they came up just a little bit short, but I don't want to say he was their entire defense, but without him, they just can't function. He might not be the defense, but he's definitely the foundation. Everything is him being able to cut off the rim and make it impossible for anybody to get in there and just be a nightmare. And at the combine, or the Portsmouth Invitational Tournament, I think he measured 6'11", 220, and his wingspan was something like 7'5". And it's like, okay, now this is why this pops so much on defense. If anybody, they're going to invest like, a later first round pick. I wouldn't advise it at 31, but Troy Weaver's predilection for centers, I wouldn't put it out of the question. He would be the one that I would definitely fight the fan base on if they overreacted on it, because it's like, just this guy's another level of, shot blocker and rim deterrent too. He doesn't even need to block shots. He's one of those guys that has such a long wingspan. And then you look at film, they're just like, forget it. Let's go do something else.
Yeah, I do like him as well. I think, like you said, 31 may be a little bit too rich, only because you probably can get better value there and still get him as an undrafted free agent on the two-way. So if you can get someone else that you may like at 31 and feel good about getting Mensah as an undrafted free agent, especially when you get into the 50s and agents are like, no, don't draft my client. We want to choose where we want to go. I can certainly see that happening.
Yeah, he's somebody I feel pretty confident too. If he came into the Pistons, he would take Wiseman and Bagley's lunch money. Like, he's just that level of guy down low that they're going to be like, oh, this practice ain't going to be so easy anymore. And then the last two, I'll just give really quick Jordan Walsh pitch. I think he showed that he is on the level of everybody else, even though he didn't get the chance to shine and do a whole lot that he could at Arkansas. Still incredibly raw on offense. One of the main reasons I like him, though, is he's a mad trash talker, which I think the Pistons need. They need a Sheed. I keep saying that. And Walsh is a Sheed. He's one of those guys you hate to play against, but you love to have on your team. He does not care who you are or what's going on. And his defense is top notch. He has a massive wingspan. Looks like Gumby out there. Let me try and find the wingspan and everything for it. I had it pulled up and then I just lost it. But defense is where he's going to make his calling card. Think somebody like Mikal Bridges. And I implore you, if you don't know about Jordan Walsh, put Mikal Bridges' freshman stats up against Jordan Walsh's, and they're pretty similar. The main difference is Mikal shot something like 70% from 2-point range, But that's because he was on a team with national title like guards and guys that took pressure off him, whereas Walsh's is still in the high 50s. But that would be my bet and my pitch on people is like, Mikhail was mainly a defender at the first. It took him a while to get his ball skills. It took him a while to round out his 3-point shot. I think Walsh will be fine. Measured in at 6'5" 3/4 inch without shoes. So he's around 6'6", 6'7" in shoes, 204 pounds, and then 7'1" and 1 inch, or 7'1" 3/4 inch wingspan. Like, this is exactly the type of player the Pistons need to be invested in, especially at 31, where he has defensive tools to work with, and you're only asking him to get like role player skills on offense first, round out that 3-point shot. He does have really good finishing numbers, though. Jordan Walsh shot 65.8% at the rim on 79 shots, which was the shot he took the most. So that's another thing, too. Just get him in here, attack closeouts. He can finish when he gets in there. Super long limbs, too, to where he just takes like 2 steps and he's already at the rim. I really buy into Jordan Walsh as a sheet, as that defender. That could be the next Mikal Bridges.
I really love that you saw that Jordan Walsh is one of your guys. He was just on the cusp for me as well. Just such a terrific, like, intangible role player supporting piece. Like, he'll get dirty. He was on the floor for loose balls at the combine. It was one play, got the ball on the floor for a loose ball, got the assist, from off his butt. Has some slashes. It'll be all come down to, for the most part, with teams projecting that 3-point shot. It's fairly fluid. He only shot 27% on took 72 shots from deep as well. But if you believe in, it's all projection. If you believe that he's going to shoot at least at a league average level, then I think this is going to be a fantastic spot, and also fantastic value for him as well. Just what he does defensively, ultimate competitor. He's a winner. All the different tools that you mentioned, from the wingspan, he'll defend, he'll rebound. Like, he just really does makes so many winning plays.
Yeah, and the other guy, the last guy in my top 6 is Jordan Miller. Jordan Miller, to me, is the guy that got penalized the most by these events because his game is not going to shine and show out at these type of events. Number one, he's a defender's defender. He will defend you the minute he gets out of bed. I'm not going to go into too much detail because Draft Deeper and I profiled Jordan Miller. He's one of the guys that I argue for the Pistons needing to take at 31. The 3-point shot was up and down, but it was 35.2% this last season, and then was able to continue to get better every time he took more threes than he'd taken before. So 72 attempts or more. Every single season he took 72 attempts from 3 or more. He shot 33% or better. So there were 3 seasons, 2 at George Mason, and then this one at Miami where he was able to take over 72 threes, and then he shot 33%. The free throw numbers continue to go up. And then again, as a 5th-year senior at Miami, took 125 free throw attempts, which is more than he's ever taken, and shot a career high 78.4% from that free throw line. To me, there's nothing but positive indicators in Jordan Miller's shot. 6'6", around 202. I can get his official measurements as well. And all the official measurements I'm getting from the No Ceilings guys. If you're wanting to know official measurements from the combine, go to the New Ceilings Twitter at No Ceilings NBA, I believe is what it is. And
all of them do just terrific work.
Yeah, and they have a thread that has all of the official measurements there. So shout out to those guys. Thanks for doing that, because it's always a pain to try and find all these things in one spot. But Jordan Miller, I buy into on defense. I buy into his supplementary role skills. And then one last time, Jordan Miller shot 182 shots at the rim, and he shot 73.1%. That's banana for a wing or a guard. It's like big man numbers. You would be praising a center if they shot like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Jordan's another guy that I'm happy that you brought up as well. He's one that I've seen here in my area for a while, since he was in high school, and being able to see him up close at George Mason. And I just remember watching him at George Mason, and it's kind of just development from what was that Middleburg for high school, and then went over to George Mason for college. But just always saying like he looks like an NBA prospect from his measurables, the way he moves, his feel for the game, the overall versatility. My thing has always just been the shooting. And not only has he developed as a shooter, he still has some room to grow, of course, but the confidence in shooting. So he would pass up shots to George Mason, look to get to the mid range to do other things or pass the ball and, pass up open shots. And then gradually his shot making confidence start to go up and up and up. And you see it now. Historic performance in, I believe it was the Final Four or some, maybe the Elite Eight somewhere.
Final Four, yeah, they made it to the Final
Final
Four.
Four. And he's just does all the role player things. Like he's long, he uses his tools. I really love Jordan Miller, and it's about if you believe he's going to be a reliable 3-point shooter. I wish he was just either a little bit taller, like if he was closer to 6'9", or if he was a little bit more bouncier. But I love everything else that he does, and it's all going to come down to how reliable of a shooter that he can be.
Yeah, so Jordan Miller's official measurements at the combine were 6'4.5" without shoes, 191 pounds, 6'11", 6'11.75" wingspan, so just under 7 feet. Another guy that profiles really well physically with that wingspan to be able to guard out on the wing. Again, we just want you to get after on defense, have supplementary role player stuff. So that's what the Pistons need, in my opinion. So thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge on the off-season events and giving us a perspective from somebody who's there on the ground and attending these things. Final question is the hardest question. Joe D was going to get off the phone and ask you, but I think he's still, on the line with MJ. So who would you select if you were Troy Weaver and the Pistons? Who do you select at pick number 5? Now that we have number 5, that's the only question on Piston fans' minds, it seems.
Yeah, I don't blame him. I mean, it's like you had mentioned before, we're expected to be at 5, a little bit higher, so I understand. It all depends on where the board kind of drops, at that point, they're kind of the mercy of other teams, especially where the draft kind of maybe really gets started at 4, depending who's there. But at 5, if he is there, I'm going with Jarris Walker. I mean, just one of the most versatile defenders in the draft. Already with the NBA ready body, with his size and frame and length, the power, the strength. Terrific cutter. He knows how to play the game. Excellent off of short rolls. I know there is some, decisive. What's the best way to put it? There is some doubt, I'll say, about his overall offensive game and upside. I think he put a lot more on tape, throughout high school at IMG, and being able to show us a little bit more of his shot creation profile. I don't see him as a number 2 or 3 type scorer. That's just personally, you want the type to have that type of upside at 5. But I think ideally he's probably that 4th scorer who at certain moments can rise to being your 3rd best scorer, occasionally 2nd, but mostly from offensively in that 3rd or 4th. But the upside is there as a legitimate shot maker, a reliable open shooter that is just a monster defensively with his ability to switch, guard multiple positions, and then also just be so disruptive on the defensive end as well.
So my pipe dream is Jaden Ivey, Cade Cunningham, Jarris Walker, Isaiah Stewart, Jalen Duren starting 5. Is that feasible? Is that possible?
It certainly seems like it is. I think the only concern there, or one of the prime concern, is the floor spacing. That'll be up to Troy to, the rest of the team to fill in the rest of the roster there with appropriate shooting. You still have Bogey there, obviously. I do like Isaiah Livers as a shooter, as a 3-and-D guy as well. So you have to fill out the rest of the roster. But as far as them being able to get to where they want defensively, and be switchable with these type of athletes, I think that would be a perfect fit, and the offense will hopefully will come.
Yeah, so I've been calling the Jalen Duren beef stew the double beef lineup with Jarris. It's triple beef, so I'm loving for
Beef.
triple beef. So absolutely, and Jarris Walker there at the combine measured 6 foot 6.5 inches tall without shoes, 248 pounds. I mean, he's a grown man for sure, and then 7'2.5" wingspan. So he is somebody that has some of the best tools out there. Can you also speak to like there are a lot of people that are going to be in the chat here when this thing airs of like, oh, Beef Stew and Isaiah Stewart and Jarris Walker, they're the same player. Can you please dispel that myth here in Pistons land?
I certainly don't believe that as well. Jarris has more juice with the ball in his hands. There's just more ball skills and just a much versatile defender that I would feel comfortable about. All right, I need you to start out on LeBron. I need you to start out on Paul George. He's a guy that's not just, all right, you can switch. No, I like 1 through 4. I need you to guard this person, and that's something that I do feel that he'll be able to do. And not only just be a stopper, but also a disruptor, very active as well. And, Isaiah Stewart doesn't quite have those defensive tools. The way he gets it done defensively is completely different. And I know there are some that believe that Walker is more of a big. I think he's more of a big wing than a big.
Thank you. Thank you. I've been the only one saying it. So yeah, I'm right there with you.
So if you think he is more of a big, I guess I can maybe squint and see where people are coming from, why there's a lot of similarities there. But I think they distinctly have two very different games on both ends of the floor.
Yeah, I totally agree. Some of the things in the profile, the no ceilings interview they did with Marcus Sasser. Marcus Sasser said Jarris Walker had one of the best handles on the team that they didn't let him show there at Houston. 4.1 assists is what Jarris Walker averaged as a senior in high school per game. 385 assists total across all 4 years in high school. He has these other things. I keep telling people here that Jarris Walker is somewhere between OG Anunoby and Bam Adebayo. Bam Adebayo is obviously like a one of a kind, not really rim protector, but this guy that guards like 4 to 5 positions every night. He's the foundation of Miami's defense. And OG is able to play shooting guard weirdly all year this year, right? Because he is so versatile and is another one of those guys that on a night you can say, okay, you're a guy guarding Giannis tonight, you're guarding LeBron tonight or whatever. And I mean, obviously you can't succeed in that every night, but you have the physicality, you have the athleticism to frustrate them. And I'm sure that, all of those top level guys are like, oh, I don't want to play the Raptors because I know OG's going to be all over me.
Exactly. That physicality, that power, that length. And I like those things that you threw out for Jarris for sure.
Again, thank you so much to Jam Hines. If you're not following this man on Twitter, do so. If you're not reading his articles, you are out of your mind. Go read every last thing that he has dropped on Draft Digest. That's why I've had all of the Draft Digest guys on here. I mean, Bryce and I have known each other beforehand through Detroit Bad Boys and just being Pistons, but Ignacio is fantastic, second to none when it comes to international. And Mr. Hines here is second to none when it comes to domestic and being on the ground, being in the gyms. You cannot discount this man's grind and this man's work. I don't say it just to say it. There are going to be few guests we have on that have this kind of resume and experience. So thank you again so much for being on with us. Tell the people where they can find you and what you got coming up.
Well, I appreciate you so much. It's been a pleasure, Joy, to be on here with you. Everyone can follow me on Twitter at Jam on the Board, so you can see my work in the great team at Draft Digest. For a lot of us, in this game here, we're ramping up for the last month or so before the NBA draft. So look forward to seeing a lot of work from me from Draft Digest and everyone that we got going, producing things out there. So right now I'm working on some quick hitters from the combine that'll be out shortly. And then I'm also working on some on Landers Molly that we talked about. So I'm looking forward to finishing those up and hopefully have them out next week.
Again, look out for those, read them, follow this man. Thank you so much for coming on here, and we will see if the Pistons land any of these guys that you laid out for us. So cannot thank you enough. We will catch you next time.